So I've mentioned many of these before. We've kind of danced around them and I told you we'd talk about them a little bit later. So here we are. Here is the lesson on more punctuation marks. Chances are these are punctuation marks you've used before and you do understand, and hopefully this will be a refresher for you. So let's look at the period. It is the punctuation mark we use to end a sentence. It's also known as a full stop, meaning we stop what we're saying before we continue. It just appears as a single dot on the bottom line of the text, and it comes immediately after the last word of the sentence without a space. And the idea of a stop and the idea of a period is that it indicates the end of a sentence. Rome is the capital of Italy. Full stop. Stop, take a breath, take a pause. You're done with that sentence. The Dalai Lama is the spiritual leader of the Tibetan people. Stop. Full sentence, complete sentence, and it ends with a stop mark. So periods do appear at the end of a sentence. They also can appear within abbreviations. And when they appear in abbreviations, it does not indicate a full stop or it does not indicate a breath. It just indicates where things are missing to create the abbreviation. So I will arrive between 6 a.m. and 7 a.m. So between the A and the M, we have periods, and they are just to indicate that AM is abbreviation, and it's not said 6 am and 7 am. Now, we do have periods in this example, but sometimes people do not include periods between their abbreviations. For example, if it was 6 a.m. with a capital AM, there typically wouldn't be periods in between. But usually if they're made up of lowercase letters, they do have periods in between. Another example that's probably more common is when we abbreviate days of the week and months of the year. So we are coming on Fry, Jan 4. And ideally, if I was reading that sentence, I would say in my head or out loud, we are coming on Friday, January 4th. I know it's an abbreviation. I recognize that, and the period shows me that it is. But when I'm reading or speaking, I tend to say the full word out loud or in my head. But in those examples, we put a period at the end where the missing letters have disappeared to create the abbreviation. The next punctuation mark we'll look at is the question mark. And as the name suggests, the question mark is what we use at the end of all direct questions. So examples of direct questions would be questions that are specific. What is your name? I am asking you specifically, what is your name? Question mark. Where are you going? This is another direct question that one person is asking another. We also have, just like we have direct and indirect quotations, we also have indirect questions. And sometimes these are tricky because these are the ones that do not need question marks. He asked me what my name was. It's not a direct question, it's an idea or a thought about what someone else asked. So there's no question mark required. This next one is one that gets tricky sometimes, and you often see incorrect usage of question marks with the verb wonder. I wonder if she likes chopped chocolate chip cookies. I wonder is when you're thinking about the question. You're not asking it directly, so there's no question mark required. So remember, for a direct question, one person asking another specifically, you use a question mark. For an indirect question, when you're thinking about a question or you're not directly asking someone, you do not need a question mark. The next great punctuation mark we have is the exclamation mark. And again, just like its title says, you are exclaiming something. This mark is used to express some sort of emotion. It can be exasperation, astonishment, surprise, some intense, strong emotion. So for example, help, help. Usually when you say that, it is in an excited or an anxious way. You're not just saying help, help. That would be using a period. But instead you're using your emotion. So you're showing that with an exclamation mark. That's unbelievable. Again, you're showing some excitement, some surprise, and your exclamation mark shows that. Run as fast as you can, he shouted. An interesting thing with this one is that run as fast as you can could also be a statement and use a period, but we see that he shouted that. So if you're shouting something, typically you're using emotion and great expression, and so you'd need an exclamation mark. So what you can notice is if you're quoting someone or something, or reading a quote about someone or something, take note of what is in the reporting clause. If it said, run as fast as you can, he said, or he whispered, you know you probably wouldn't need an exclamation mark. But run as fast as you can, he yelled, he shouted, he emphasized. That shows you that you're expressing emotion and need that exclamation mark to remind the readers and the listeners that there's some excitement in your voice. So typically in professional documents like business correspondence, business reports, even your 5-paragraph essay, chances are you're not going to use a lot of exclamation marks. And especially not multiple exclamation marks. So one is plenty and you may get away with one, but please, there's never any reason to use a double or a triple exclamation point. The next punctuation mark we will look at is the colon. Now there are 3 main uses of the colon. The first use is between 2 main clauses, where the second clause explains the first. We have a motto, live life to the fullest. So it is an instance where you have a general statement and then a specific statement that refers back to, explains, or clarifies the first. The next reason we use a colon is to introduce a list. The cost of the room included the following: breakfast, dinner, and Wi-Fi. So again, a little general bit of information, a colon, and then some specific details in a list. You can also use a colon before a long quotation. Now, this is really not a great example because it's not a long quotation. The article headline read, "Local woman saves geese." So that's an example of a quotation. The other examples of quotations are ones that you may find in APA format, a longer quotation, often a direct quotation, and sometimes we use the colon to identify that a long quotation is following. And a quotation is, just as this little picture shows, two dots, one on top of the other, separated by a little space. And we again have one at the beginning here where we show the three main uses of the colon. We also have something called a semicolon. And as the name suggests, it's not quite a colon. It is a semicolon. And it is most used to mark a break that is stronger than a comma, but not as final as a period. So it's like a dramatic pause. So it's a little bit of a longer pause than a comma, but not as strict and full as a period. Often it's used between two main clauses, two sentences that balance each other and are too closely linked to be made into separate sentences. So it's two clauses or sentences that are very closely related, still their own individual thoughts and complete sentences, and they're too important to be tied together with a conjunction, and they need to have some sort of connection, and that connection is the semicolon. Here are some examples. The film was a great success. Its lead actors were particularly pleased. The road runs through a beautiful wooded valley. The railway line follows it. Let's go to lunch. I forgot to bring food. So here are examples of sentences that we could join together, but it makes a stronger statement when they are separated by a semicolon. And often a semicolon is not used very commonly, but once you get the hang of using it correctly, and once you kind of appreciate the style it can bring to your writing, hopefully you'll start to use it more often. And I know for myself it's one that I use quite often. And a lot of times if I don't use it initially, I use it when I'm revising things. I'll write an email, I'll reread it, and I will combine some sentences with semicolons just because it makes it a little stronger and a little more stylistic. We also have something called the hyphen, and the hyphen is a punctuation mark that we use to join words or parts of words. So it is a little horizontal line in the middle of your line between two words. We have something called compound adjectives, and those are two or more words that together create an adjective. So they're known as compound modifiers, and they often have a hyphen. So it is a way to make two words joined together to make an adjective. So they had a long-term relationship. So relationship is the noun, it's the thing, and long-term is an adjective that describes it. Now, long is a word on its own, and term is a word on its own. And they mean two different things. But when you join them together with a hyphen, they, create something specific. They had a long-term relationship. Let's look at the next one. The fireproof vest proved to be a great lifesaver for Santa Claus. So fireproof is an adjective to describe vest. And fire is its own word on its own. proof is its own word on its own, but when you join them together with a hyphen, it creates a brand new adjective. So we need hyphens because working 24-hour shifts is not the same as working 24-hour shifts or 24-hour shifts. This to me is a little bit of a tongue twister, but let's break it down. We need hyphens because working 20 4-hour shifts, that is 20, the number 20, shifts 4 hours in duration, is not the same as working 24, as in the number 24 hours, shifts, or 24-hour shifts. So all three of those, depending on where you put the hyphen, means something different. So again, it's a little bit of a brain twister, but hopefully it gives you an idea of the importance of hyphens and how we can use them to convey meaning the way we want to. We also have these little guys called brackets or parentheses, and they are used to separate off information that's not necessarily essential to the meaning of the rest of the sentence. And I know we learned this before with sometimes commas act as these little indications to kind of direct or identify what things are not essential, but you can also use brackets. He asked Sarah, his great aunt, for a loan. My favorite pizza toppings, pineapple and olives, were not available, so I didn't get a slice. So I hope you notice, and maybe you should take notice yourself, when I read these sentences or when you read these sentences, how my voice changes when I read the brackets or parentheses. I kind of, not that I dismiss them or give them, any less importance, but I kind of do. I say them in a little bit of a different tone of voice to indicate that they are non-essential to the meaning of the sentence. Non-essential, of course, means that if they weren't there, it wouldn't be a big deal. You could still read, he asked Sarah for a loan, and understand the sentence. Here is just a quick overview of our different punctuation marks that we have talked about, learned in the past few lessons. You can certainly look at this when it's time to study for your next test. Keep this in mind, maybe even print it out and have it beside you if there's anything that you're confused on and wondering when to use it. Take a second here to read this cartoon about a punctuation support group. See if you can recognize why each punctuation mark is saying what it is. So hopefully this was a good refresher on punctuation marks, and perhaps it introduced you to a few other punctuation marks that either you didn't use very often or maybe that you didn't use correctly. So I challenge you going forward to start adding some of those punctuation marks into your writing. Start adding a little bit of variety to your sentence structure and adding some style. Please, though, no triple exclamation points. We can be excited, but we can't be that excited. Thanks, guys. Have a great rest of your day.